Most people, when they go to Mallorca, they sit on the beach. They swim in the sea. And last October, when my wife and I went to Mallorca for 2 weeks, we certainly did sit on the beach and we certainly did swim in the sea. But we also discovered that there was a gentleman there who lived there called Juan Macaro. I hope I'm saying his name right. Probably not. But anyway, he had translated a lot of the Upanishads into English and also the Bhagavad Gita. And so, funny enough, we were sitting on beaches not far from where he had been translating all these Upanishads. And while we were there, we discovered there was such a thing as the Sarasvati Upanishad. I never knew this existed before. But it was intriguing. And so we spent a fortnight translating the Sarasvati Upanishad. What about Sarasvati? Well, what's significant in this text in particular is that the goddess actually speaks to us. And this is why we've called it So Spoke the Goddess. I've never come across this before. A goddess actually talking to you. It's quite something. So this is called the Sarasvati Rahasya Upanishad, to give it its full name. Saraswati means she who has the flow. Saras is a flow. Could be a flow of speech, flow of knowledge, flow of inspiration. It's the flow of this creation. And Rahasya means secret. Because this is secret doctrine in the sense that it takes a little while for the penny to drop and to understand what the goddess is saying. And Upanishad means that which destroys ignorance. Sad is to destroy, to split apart. So your ignorance this morning will be destroyed, I guarantee it, by the end of this hour. So stay with it. Chatur mukah mukam bhoja vanahangsa vadhur mama manase ramatam nityam sarva shukla saraswati. May the all-pure goddess of speech ever delight in my mind. Interesting that. It doesn't say, may my mind delight in Saraswati. It says, may Saraswati delight in my mind. We need to let Saraswati in. And we do that by letting in the great statements from the scriptures, by reflecting upon them. But we have to let them in. And in order to let them in, we have to ensure that the mind is a suitable place for the goddess to come. So we need to purify the mind. And then the goddess will naturally come in, and we will hear the great statements from the scriptures. In meditation, we will hear the mantra. All this is the work of Saraswati, this flow of consciousness. I would like to point out, you've probably noticed, she's got this instrument. Let's have a closer look at that. This is the Saraswati Veena. And this Veena is playing right now in this church. It plays through all speech. It plays through all manifestation. Saraswati is playing, and this great creation is the manifestation of Saraswati. So let's hear her music. And you can really hear creation starting to get going there, can't you? This actually symbolizes the spine because, according to the Sanskrit tradition, these sounds which you're hearing are actually coming off the spine, off the chakras, the centers in the spine. And it's true of all speech. And each voice, of course, is unique because those centers, those chakras, hold impressions from the past, from past desires, from past impressions. So it creates different voices, and this is the marvelous thing about Saraswati. She expresses herself in countless ways, even through the human voice. And of course, she has some very important symbols. In her top right hand, she holds a rosary, representing meditation. In her lower left hand, she holds a manuscript, representing knowledge. If you like, we have here meditation and reflection. Reflection on statements from the great scriptures, particularly the Upanishads. And these are the two main disciplines of Advaita Vedanta. So, this first verse, Chatur mukha mukham bhoja vanahangsa vadhur mama manase ramatam nityam sarva shukla sarasvati. The first bit of that is saying that she emerges from this mouth of the Creator, and that's the Chatur Mukha, one who has 4 faces, 4 mouths. And there's a story here, which is a bit scandalous, but never mind. You see, Brahma, the Creator, at the beginning of creation, felt that something was a little awry. There was just consciousness, but he felt there needed to be something to spice up things a bit. Maybe some names and forms, because initially there weren't any names or forms. So he thought, I'm going to create a daughter from my mouth. And he created Saraswati from his mouth. But the difficulty was, as soon as he saw how beautiful Saraswati, his daughter, was, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He was obsessed with her. She was rather embarrassed by this attention she was receiving from her own father. So she went to the side. But as she went to the side, Brahma sprouted another face. He couldn't take his eyes off her. She was also rather embarrassed, so she went behind him, and he sprouted another face. She went over to this side. He sprouted another face. He had 4 faces, and now she couldn't escape his glance. She thought, there's only one thing for it. I'm going to jump up into the heavens, into the Milky Way, up into the sky. So up she went. And then Brahma sprouted a 5th head with an elongated neck, so he could see Saraswati, his daughter, this brilliant creation he had made. Shiva, at this point, thought this was all rather improper. He came in his ugra, his fierce form, with his sword and chopped off the 5th head of Brahma. That'll teach Brahma a lesson. So what does this mean? According to Advaita Vedanta, you are that consciousness. And this whole creation is there. This whole creation of name and form is produced, arises from that consciousness. But we tend to get obsessed by particular forms. And this is really the message of the Upanishad. Yes, there is this name and form which appears, but our true nature is the being, consciousness, and bliss. And the Upanishad invites us to discard name and form. This is called in the text Nama Rupa Pritak Kriti, making oneself separate from name and form, realizing that name and form are passing. It's a passing show. We need to stay with the being, consciousness, and bliss. How? And this is where Saraswati comes in. She can help you to stay with that being, consciousness, and bliss. She can also bind you, so watch out. But within Saraswati, the mechanism, if you like, for freeing oneself from this obsession with particular forms, particular things, she can release you from that. You know what it's like. I was actually speaking about this yesterday. I managed to get a new car. It wasn't really new, it was 20 years old. But it had a perfect bodywork. And I thought, yeah, actually the wing mirrors work, unlike the previous car I had. And then 2 days ago, someone bumped into the side and smashed one of the wing mirrors. And it was as if I had been somehow harmed by this. I didn't realize I'd got attached to this old banger. But in some sort of way, we're always getting attached to old bangers. It could be our body. It could be our relatives. It could be anything. Our house. We tend to get attached to things. We tend to get fixated on name and form. And this Upanishad is inviting us to stand back, to realize that name and form is passing. Several other symbols here can be picked up with the same message. The lotus flowers down in the river or lake that she's sitting next to. Of course, the lotus flowers represent this detachment because the lotus flower stands up above the muddy water. You should go to Kew Gardens at the moment. There are some marvelous examples of this in the lakes there. A beautiful symbol. And the peacock, sometimes it's a swan, also a sign of reason. And again, reason is the discrimination between the changing and the unchanging, which is really the same thing as detachment. So this message is coming over, this same message is coming over again and again in different ways. The text says, her river of nectar, because Saraswati has nectar, she commands this special juice, sometimes called soma juice, which if you drink it, you discover that immortality. You remember that immortality. You go beyond death. You go beyond the forms. You go beyond the names. Her river of nectar dispels the suffering of transmigratory existence. So she always is depicted as sitting next to water, a river. The text goes into a bit more detail at this point. She has a graceful throat, beautiful lips, and is decorated with all ornaments. And at this point, when we got to this bit of the text, my wife said, I know what that is. I hadn't quite picked this up, but my wife had. It's the Sanskrit alphabet. Here's the graceful throat sounds. Here are the beautiful lip sounds. And all these are the ornaments. Sanskrita means ornamented. The word Vyanjana, meaning consonant, particularly means ornament. So this is an obvious reference to the Sanskrita language and alphabet, which Saraswati presides over. But of course, Saraswati presides over all language. Saraswati is being heard in this church now. It's coming through the English language as well. And she is described as Vitti Vallabha. Vallabha means loving. Loving the Vitti. And this can be taken in 3 ways. First of all, Vitti is law in the normal sense in which we would understand it. If you do something wrong, you get punished for it. Vitti, the commands, like the commands of the Mayor of London, who says you can only travel at 20 miles an hour. And I fell foul of this the other week. Caught doing 27. And you know about the Vitti when you get that letter from the Metropolitan Police inviting you to a speed awareness course. Thought that was significant. So Vitti, the law. But Vitti is also the statements from the scriptures, the commands of the scriptures, the Upanishads, in particular in this context. But Vitti has a third meaning, and perhaps this is the deepest meaning. It means Brahma himself. Because after this rather difficult time when Saraswati was first born, she agreed to marry him. Because name and form is not separate from the consciousness. The names and forms in this church are, as it were, married to the consciousness. And this marriage we can experience now. There is no difference between the name and form and the consciousness. The names and forms are just projections, but be careful, they're changing. So one needn't get attached to them, or particular forms. The Upanishad then goes into detail about speech and how to refine speech, the nature of speech, because of course it's speech which can free one from name and form. You need the speech to free you from name and form, to remind you of your true nature of being consciousness and bliss. Speech, it says, adorned with sweet sounds. It's important that speech is sweet. And this is the goddess Lalita. Lalita means sweet. So Lalitakshara is the word used in the text, sweet sounds. And this is the goddess Lalita, expressed by limitless words. Vocabulary is very important in speech, that we can express a wide variety of ideas. The Sanskrit scriptures are amazing at this. The number of words which there are to describe particularly subtle things. But this applies to all language, and I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at some range of vocabulary, because the vocabulary expresses ideas held within different cultures. So I took the word company, and on the left, I represented the languages which I studied at school. So one of the words, at least, in French for company is entreprise, to take in hand, be enterprising. Perhaps that shows something about French culture. German, firma, meaning steady, established. Normally an agreement between people. So that's another word for company in terms of commercial company. Latin, societas, although there are so many words in Latin for this. Another one actually is compagno, talking about eating bread together. And we pick that up in English. I did study Japanese studies at school in the 6th form, and we looked at various Japanese concepts. And one of them was geisha, which means meeting at a holy place or shrine. And this is very much how the Japanese seem to do business. They seem to regard it almost as sacred. And I did come across this. shortly after I'd done Japanese studies, I was working in the city of London. And on one occasion, it was during one of these railway strikes in the early 1980s. And all the people in the office, it was a stockbroking office, they all went home to their mansions in Tunbridge Wells or wherever they lived. And the office was deserted. I was going to a philosophy group that evening, actually. I stayed in the office. And they said, "Oh, Warwick, can you please entertain these Japanese people who are turning up today? They want to find out about the unlisted securities market," which I happen to know a little bit about. And I said, "Yes, okay, I'll entertain them." And so I waited, and sure enough, these 6 Japanese businessmen came in, beautifully dressed, immaculately dressed in suits. And at the front of the queue of these 6 was a senior partner, obviously, and at the back, the most junior. And I spoke to the senior partner, and he said nothing. And the person at the back came in front and said, "I'm sorry, the senior partner can't speak to you. You're too young." And I was only 18, 19 years old. And I'd been put into this position. And I said, "I totally understand." Because fortunately, I had studied this word kaisha. I understood about what was going on, the formality of it. And I'm sure it was right in a way. I shouldn't be speaking to this man. I knew very little about the subject. Anyway, I then searched the office and found one of the partners who had fallen asleep and was snoring loudly in a corner, who had missed his train back to Tunbridge Wells, and woke him up. And he said, "Yes, I'll see something, Warwick." So anyway, there was a conversation which went on. But anyway, it just illustrates the concept of kaisha, this sacred meeting with great formality. Pali Sangha. This is a meeting of monks, so very much to do with Buddhism. I studied Pali at university. And then Sanskrit satsanga is one word we could use. Sangha itself means attachment, but satsanga is attachment to the sat, which is what we really want. But then the text makes an important point. Speech is shaped by the speaker's intent. And this is vivaksha. And this is most important. We need not only to look at the exteriors of speech, but the interior. If we are to purify the mind sufficiently for Saraswati to come in, we need to look at our deep intentions. Why are we saying that? Whenever we say anything, what's the real motive? Why am I giving this lecture? Is it for self-aggrandizement? Or is it genuinely to help? Always ask yourself these questions. Now, so far, we've seen the Lalita forms, the sweet forms of the goddess, but she does come in fierce forms. You may have come across this. I certainly have. Whose tresses are adorned with the crescent moon of divine light. She is depicted as having a crescent moon in her hair. This is the reflected light, because Saraswati is the reflected light of consciousness. She appears in the arts, she appears in dance, she appears in all literature. And all the influences which might lead to sattva are the work of Saraswati. Sattva is the beingness, the goodness. And it's that sattva which we need to purify the mind. And when the mind is purified, we stand a better chance of remembering that being, consciousness, and bliss. But I don't think you would want to meet this Saraswati down a dark alley at night. Or perhaps you would, because with her trident, she will destroy your ignorance. This is why she has weapons. They are to destroy ignorance. To look at this in more detail and more profoundly, let's refer to Sri Shantananda Saraswati. Note, he's called Saraswati. And Sri Shantananda Saraswati said on this subject, when a sound, with its measures of vowels, comes to be uttered, it creates a particular type of vibration. And these vibrations affect the outer creation and also the inner metabolism of the individual. I first came across this statement as a teenager, and I was studying some languages, and what I would do is I would spend, say, a month in the summer holidays in Germany, then a month in France, trying to speak these languages. And what I noticed was when I was speaking a particular language, I took on a different personality. I sort of transformed into someone French or someone rather more Germanic. And there were very different characters. And then I came back home and I was English again. And I suddenly realized I'd been living in my life as an English person, surrounded by Englishness, the English language. And then I could take on different guises depending upon which language I spoke. I thought it'd be interesting to see how Saraswati manifests in different languages and the effect of that. Because it's these vowel sounds which are crucial. So we're going to hear the Lord's Prayer in some different languages, and I'd like you to listen to the vowel sounds and see what effect that has upon the mind. I also had a little conversation here with ChatGPT, as you do these days, and it talked about these vowel sounds in different languages and their cultural echo, as it put it. Obviously, this is based upon quite a lot of research which has gone on. I don't know where quite it's pulling it from, but it said of French that the vowel trays are nasal and elegant, and the cultural echo of that is aesthetics and refinement. We can agree or disagree, but let's hear it.
Notre Père qui es aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié, que ton règne vienne, que ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain de ce jour. Pardonne-nous nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons aussi à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous soumets pas à la tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Au nom du Père, du Fils et du Saint-Esprit. Amen.
Very beautiful. And you can hear Saraswati coming through there. German was the other language I spent a long time attempting to speak, and ChatGPT said it was ordered and rich. The vowel trays were ordered and rich. Cultural echo, precision, structure. So these sounds are actually causing that particular culture, according to what Sri Shantananda Saraswati is saying. Let's hear this.
Vater unser im Himmel, geheiligt werde dein Name, dein Reich komme, dein Wille geschehe, wie im Himmel so auf Erden. Unser tägliches Brot gib uns heute und vergib uns unsere Schuld, wie auch wir vergeben unseren Schuldigen. Und führe uns nicht in Versuchung, sondern erlöse uns von dem Bösen. Denn dein ist das Reich und die Kraft und die Herrlichkeit in Ewigkeit. Amen.
Very different quality, but beautiful in its own way, and the beauty of Saraswati showing through in these different ways. Latin, a more traditional language perhaps, ancient language for the Lord's Prayer. Symmetrical, exact, the vowel trays, and cultural echo, authority, clarity.
Te quies in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra, panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, Cut et nos dimittimus debitorbus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen.
Of course, I was tempted to find one for Sanskrit as well. And it's difficult to find one, actually. They were all sung and not terribly good quality. But anyway, I will play this because you do pick up the vowel sounds. The consonants aren't particularly clear. Anyway, according to ChatGPT, the vowel trays of Sanskrit are sacred and resonant, and the cultural echo, spirituality, and structure.
यथा स्वर्गे तथा मेधेन्यापि तव इच्छा सिद्ध्यतु स्वस्तिनं लक्ष्य मध्यमप्यं देहि वयश्च यथा समपराधेन क्षमामहे तथा त्वं समपराधं क्षमस्वः अस्मात् परीक्षामनय अपि तु दुरात्मा यतो राज्य पराक्रमः तथापश्च युगे युगे तवैव Amen.
When inspiration is taken from the goddess, the unheard teaching is heard. I was actually going to Kew Gardens last week just to really steep myself in this text. And it is amazing when you really concentrate on a text, when you really give it your attention, when you recite it aloud, you immerse yourself in it. You take the inspiration from the goddess and the unheard teaching, the previously unheard teaching is heard. There is a story about this. There was once a demon who came along and stole Saraswati's pitcher of nectar. So this can be Saraswati's pitcher of nectar. And he went off and hid himself. The gods became very concerned because they thought, well, if the demons get hold of that nectar of Saraswati, they're going to become immortal. We've got to do something about this. They went to Saraswati and they said, Saraswati, take on your ugra form, take on your fierce form. Get back that pitcher of nectar. Get back your nectar. Slay those demons with your trident. And she said, no, I will not. Instead, she went amidst the demons and started to play her veena and danced. And the demon who stole the nectar, hearing this divine music, seeing Saraswati dance in front of him, fell on his knees and said, I surrender the nectar back to you. Please teach me your divine music and divine dance. And this is why the Gandharvas are known as the presiding deities of dance and music, because she taught this Gandharva, this previously rather demonic character, these great disciplines of dance and music. And finally, Saraswati herself speaks. She says, ever absolute am I, by nature, being, consciousness, and bliss. There's a lot of philosophy which follows. That's verse 11. The next 20 verses are pure philosophy in a very novel way. The Advaita teaching expressed very novelly, but I'm just going to introduce one particular aspect of the teaching. It is said that everything has three aspects which are eternal. Every being, every creature, every object has asti, existence, bhati, perceptibility, shining, and priti, it is full of love. But also, it has nama and rupa, name and form. And the text says, discard the name and form. Stay with the asti, bhati, priti. And these correspond to the sat, the being, the chit, the consciousness, and the ananda, the bliss. Thank you.